Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. President. In 2015, 85 United States senators voted for fixing the No Child Left Behind law. We reversed the trend to a national school board and began to restore decisions to classroom teachers, to local school boards, and to states. The Wall Street Journal said that it was the largest evolution of power from Washington to the states in 25 years. The Department of Education regulation that we seek to overturn today does exactly the reverse. It begins to restore the National School Board, and it begins to take away responsibility from classroom teachers, from local school boards, and from states. And it does this in direct violation of the law that we passed, with 85 of us voting for it 15 months ago. So the question before us today is not only whether we believe in a national school board or a local school board. The question is whether we believe Congress ought to write the laws or the United States Department of Education ought to write the laws. Article 1 of the United States Constitution says that the United States Congress, we should write the laws. The purpose of this resolution is to overturn a Department of Education regulation that in 7 specific cases directly violates the Every Student Succeeds Act passed 15 months ago. And in 16 additional cases, it exceeds the authority allowed by the law. I spoke on this floor yesterday in detail about each of those 23 instances. It's very unusual for the United States Congress actually to prohibit a department from regulating on an issue. But that's exactly what Congress did. The regulation says to states, the regulation we're seeking to overturn, ignore the law that 85 senators passed 15 months ago, ignore the law President Obama's called a Christmas miracle, ignore the law that governors and teachers and school boards and superintendents all supported, and even ignore why they supported it, and listen instead to unelected bureaucrats in the U.S. Department of Education. This regulation issued by the Department of Education specifically does things or requires states to do things that Congress said in our law that the department cannot do. Therefore, it violates the law. For example, Congress said to the department, you cannot tell states what to do about fixing low-performing schools in Alaska or Tennessee or your state. That's a state decision. But this regulation does that anyway. And then Congress said to the department, you cannot tell states exactly how to rate the public schools in your state. But this regulation does that anyway. This isn't a trivial matter. The remarkable consensus that developed in 2015 in support of the bill fixing No Child Left Behind was, I said earlier, to reverse the trend to a national school board, restore to states and classroom teachers and communities decisions about what to do about schools. People had grown fed up with Washington telling teachers and schools and superintendents and states so much about what to do about our children in 100,000 public schools. So this regulation goes to the heart, which contravenes the law, goes to the heart of that consensus. This resolution ensures that the law is implemented the way Congress wrote it. This resolution restores flexibility. This resolution preserves local decision-making. This resolution scuttles new and burdensome reporting requirements that are in the department regulation. This resolution ensures strong accountability for our schools, but it is state accountability. That's what we decided in our law. Chaos? My distinguished friend from Washington said chaos. The Secretary of Education has announced that states may continue to follow the exact same timetable that the former Secretary King, announced for sending in their Title I plans. And if they have questions about how to do that, they can read the law, they can read the guidance, they can read frequently asked questions, or they can make a telephone call. This resolution does not in any way give the Secretary new authority. In fact, it limits her authority and the authority of the next Secretary, because if we stand up and say that we're not going to allow any Secretary of Education, whether it's Secretary King or Secretary DeVos to, in 23 different instances in a regulation, contravene the authority granted in a law, that means that we won't have secretaries imposing their own policies. We'll have Congress writing the law. These regulations, the one we're overturning, is not required by the law. It's allowed by the law, but it's not required by the law. School districts can read the law. Future secretaries will be able to write regulations on this subject. Of course they will. When you overturn a regulation, it does mean that the secretary can't issue a new regulation on substantially the same subject, but that simply means in a common sense way that the secretary can't turn right around and do the same thing that we just overturned. So this is a question of whether we're going to restore the National School Board. The 85 senators voted to reverse. Question of whether you believe Congress writes the law or the United States Department of Education writes the law. This resolution upholds the law that received 85 votes from United States senators. I urge my colleagues to vote aye. An aye vote preserves the bipartisan consensus, Madam President. A nay vote undermines the bipartisan consensus. Thank the President. I yield the floor.